Okay, now let's look at bringing the geometry that we transformed back into Revit so that we have those adaptive components. And maybe the best thing to do here is just to kind of zoom out for a second and make sure we're kind of clear on what we've kind of done. You know, the first setup was to create our decorative rib system. Then eventually we applied this adaptive component to it. And then I put us through this kind of new exercise of finding each one of the midpoints of this, and then creating a new coordinate system up here on the top that I'm circling around, and then taking that the polygons and then re-imaging them on this flat surface so that we could dimension them and work with them. So now we want to actually, besides manipulating polygons, we want to go back to that idea of adaptive components by points. We want these to actually be the parts laying here. So I'm going to pull this way down here because we're going to actually now join up the two. We're going to apply just another series to that adaptive components by points. So we have to do a few, obviously, as we always do, a few manipulations or changes. We need to get back. Our geometry here right now is, let me zoom in here, is generated from the polygons. And we really want to get down back to that idea of them just being polygons and not a surface. So I'm going to plug this into the geometry. And now we're back to those ideas of the triangles, all right, those polygons, as the geometry that we manipulated. The patches are still there. We're just not showing them. And I'm going to take that now, that new geometry, and get back the points that we had, or the points at each corner. So I'm going to use the polygon points. Dot points. So I'm sorry, I'm not typing in the search box. That's really aggravating. Once again, I got the little hand thing. Let me find a place where I can just change that back. Sorry about that delay. Polygon dot points. Oops. And I think this is the one. We're going to input a polygon and get points back out of it. I'm going to go ahead and pull that in. And now you'll see the little points on the end of our polygon showing back up again, which is the same thing as the points we were using for our adaptive components by points. We need a list create to add two series together. And I want to bring two lists together. So I'll bring these points in, and I'll bring these points in, and then I'll bring that list into points. And it's going to error out. And that's going to probably be really frustrating because it says, if we, let me just zoom in here so we can see that. It says converting an array to an Autodesk group, blah, 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 will cause the array rank reduction. So we're back to that idea of the lists not matching to each other. So let me just take a minute and show you how they're different from each other. Let me pull a point into the watch box. And we have a list of a single depth of list, a nested list. But if we pull the other one in, let me pull this one back and reconnect it here. I'm going to pull this one up. And you'll notice now that we have this three levels of lists. So we have an extra level of list. So that's causing a mismatch of the data set when we're trying to assign those points to it. So what we need to do is once again flatten. And I'm going to do it wrong to start off with, just for the sake of showing you what's going to happen. I'm going to put that list into the flatten command, and I'll pull this over to the watch box. And now you notice that we no longer know which list of lists are. We don't have the 3 points pulled out of each polygon. And that's because we've over flattened it. And so what we can do is we've actually gone 2 levels in, but we can actually control that by that input. So I'm going to do a number. So this tells us how deep we want to go into the nesting. And I only want to go 1 level deep or eliminate 1 level of nesting. So I'm going to put that into the amount. And now you'll notice if you look back up at the chart, we have a list with 3 points in each one of them. So it matches exactly what the other list looks like. So now that those two lists match, I can put that back in here. I'm having a little hard time seeing which one is which. Well, it doesn't matter because well, that one's actually connected. I see that. And then this one still needs to be connected to the bottom of this one. And when I do that, the error goes away. And if we close this down, you can see now we have our new adaptive components placed in that location. So we can do a bunch of things now. Let's go to, let's look at it from level 1 here. I think that'll show, oh, that's interesting. It's not showing our geometry. There we go. It's showing it on site level. It's just because we don't have, it's not showing up because it's not in the right orientation for whatever level it needs to be on. Something I'll need to, I'll troubleshoot in a minute. What I wanted to do though is actually, let's just go back out to Dynamo for a second and stretch things out so they're not overlapping. So once again, remember we have all that control over that of our spacing. So I'm going to go, the number of panel spaces, we don't need an array 16 by 16, so I can just shrink that down right away. And then I can zoom up on the panel spacing so they're further apart. And that takes care of their overlapping. And we maybe just move it a little bit further away from our object. And then if we go back to Revit, now they're in a relatively good position. I guess I should actually space them out a little further. Just bear with me here, I'll go back and do that. So I'm going to go back to panel spacing, and I'll just stretch these out further apart. So we have room for our dimensions to exist. And we still have way too many points in our array here. Oops, I didn't mean the offset of the array, I meant the number of points. Let's just put in 4, because there's 16. Just so we have, actually we only have, yeah, so we have 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12. And so this gives us 16. So that's a good amount over. All right. So now we go ahead and look at dimensioning these. So I'm going to grab the annotate tool. And let's just put a couple of dimensions here. I'll do it on this one also. And I'm doing this on the site, so the scale's a little bit screwed up. But I really wanted to just demonstrate this to start off with. Let's see if we can do an angular dimension also. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's just make a manipulation of our form. Or one thing we can do is maybe take down the number of ribs and then also the height. So let's go back out to Dynamo and go back to some of our major settings here. So that was saying 12 as the height of the structure. So let's say we'll go to, let's say 16, and the number of ribs, let's say we'll go down to 8, and I think that'll end up giving us 9 ribs, but we'll see how that goes. So that's set on automatic. So let's go back here now again. And it still says 12. I'm going to guess it's saying 12 because we're not in the right orientation for Dynamo to update. So I'm going to click back to the 3D view, and then we'll go back to Dynamo again. And it says run completed. So now let's close this back off again and go back to that site. And then we can see how those have updated. So now that's 16 feet as we set it for before. So I guess next what I would like to do is just take a few minutes and think about now doing some kind of design embellishments. Obviously this adaptive component we made is a bit clunky, so let's take a few minutes and do a little bit of a redesign of the of that element and see if we can enhance the way things look.